Now over a decade since the process officially began, and the Philadelphia 76ers find themselves in a frighteningly similar place. After going to such drastic lengths to make sure they could escape the no man's land of not being good enough to compete for a championship and not being bad enough to round up a top pick, the Sixers find themselves in just about the same spot. I want to break down why I think this official weekend was the Sixers throwing in the towel and why we are looking at a lost season for this Sixers team. We have tried so hard to desperately talk ourselves into keeping things afloat, but this just feels like a cursed season by every single sign that we have given. And to dive into exactly why here, we did get this report from Jake Fisher saying, quote, 4 trades have already come and gone, and we can surely brace for more. The Sixers, just to name one example, are a team to monitor. Their lead up to the February 6th trade buzzer will be telling. If this nightmare season continues to doom Philly in the win column with a grueling slate filled with playoff teams over their next 11 games, there won't be much incentive to splurge for reinforcements on the trade market. Now, granted, we knew the context of what went into the season. Obviously, clearing the cap space this summer, adding Paul George, bringing in some win-now veterans, the Caleb Martins, the Gershon Yabuselis, and it just straight up is not going down on the floor. Now, granted, we know exactly why. Joel Embiid has played just 13 games. The trio of Joel Embiid, Paul George, and Tyrese Maxey have shared the floor for just 10 total games together, and every notable piece of the Sixers team has battled some sort of injuries. We'll dig a little deeper on the Joel conversation, but we've seen Paul George with the 2 knee issues. We've seen Tyrese Maxey have the hamstring issue that prevented him from remaining on the floor for a stretch. Jared McCain has been shut down for the year due to that meniscus tear, and to be perfectly honest, that is really when I think the season went off the rails. But the reality is, fate is taking care of itself here. And why I say that is to pull up the Sixers schedule. For starters, they have lost 6 consecutive games at this point, and to add to where that puts them in the standings, they remain in 11th place with a 15-26 record. That's right, 11 games below 500. That is how bad things have gotten. But to touch on that schedule once again, back-to-back losses against the Pacers and Bucks. This is 3 games. They did have a stretch where 13 of the next 14 games were against opponents with above 500 records. We're going through that stretch right now, and obviously not having the success as is sort of expected here. I think that loss to the Pelicans was probably the low point of the season, and that is when the towel was gotten thrown in. That we saw these back-to-back matchups against the Indiana Pacers and Milwaukee Bucks ultimately ended with losses. And why these were so concerning to me is because straight up the Sixers did not play bad. But you're just not going to win very many games when a guy like Ricky Council IV, and God bless his soul for playing hard, bringing it. I don't mean this as a criticism of Ricky Council specifically, but if he's in your starting lineup, you got to do some reevaluations as an NBA team on if you can consider yourself a serious contender, because these Sixers absolutely cannot. But they are in a difficult spot because we know what is going down with the draft pick situation. That is a top 6 protected pick, meaning if it falls in the first 6 selections of this draft, the Sixers do keep the pick. If it does not, it goes to the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are maddening with all the praise that they were getting for the way that they built this roster, as the Sixers really tried to do the exact same thing and the NBA stepped in. So I need Brian Colangelo stuck in that Thunder organization as soon as possible, but nonetheless, I digress. To talk a little bit more about the Sixers team, do want to pull up the multi-year cap sheet here, and I think we get a kind of a look of what needs to be done ahead of the deadline. So one of the things that Joel Embiid has been so vocal about really over the past couple seasons is building some sort of continuity. Unfortunately, this may be a season in which you take 1 step back to go 3 steps forward. And why I say that is we at least got somewhat of a sample size of what it looks like with Joel Embiid, with Tyrese Maxey, with Paul George. No, it was not great, but they were 7-3 in those games. And I do think that is going to be something that the organization clings to moving forward. They're going to look at, we know it was a small sample size, but we gave each of these guys notable contract extensions for a reason. And if you want to take a step back and think about this, if your starting point is Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, Jared McCain, and a top potentially 5 pick, that's a pretty good start there. Now, granted, the draft pick conversation to dig into here, once again, we do know that it is top 6 protected. And to take a peek at these standings here, this only being in the Eastern Conference, this is why it's such a difficult spot for this Sixers team. They're not going to be worse than the teams below them. Maybe the Hornets could potentially pass them, but you're not going to be worse than the Wizards. You're not going to be able to you're not going to be worse than the Raptors. You're not going to be worse than the Brooklyn Nets, who, while they're playing good basketball and frankly have been far more tolerable as far as watching than a lot of these teams, and I would even include the Sixers on that list there, but they are actively trying to get worse. They are going to trade Cam Johnson ahead of the trade deadline. They likely are going to ship off Nick Claxton. They've already gotten rid of Dennis Schroeder. They've already gotten rid of Dorian Finney-Smith. Shake Milton got sent out of there. They are very very clearly trying to get in this tank situation. But let's think about the best case scenario for the Sixers team. Maybe you get lucky, and to pull in the exact odds of them keeping this pick here, shout out to Derek Barnard of PHLY Sports here, who breaks down the exact table that if they have the first or second worst record, they will 100% keep the pick. The third worst record, 92.9%. The fourth, 81%. And this is where we really begin to see the drop off here. Just 63.9% if they have the fifth worst record. And frankly, I don't see a world in which they end up with a top 5 worst record. That is why this is the call to action for Daryl Morey. That I do think you unfortunately got to look yourself in the mirror. And if this is the plan of action, if this is what you need to do, you got to attack aggressively and add some draft capital to this organization. And for what it's worth, there is not an overabundance of options from the Sixers' perspective. They're in a better spot than a lot of teams in the semi-contending conversation. I'll point to the Phoenix Suns as an example of obviously the Sixers in a preferred spot, which they really have one draft pick they can swing and so much money committed to basically untradeable contracts that, yes, Devin Booker is good, yes, Kevin Durant is good, but Bradley Beal is a hurdle that you just can't quite clear as a franchise, and we're seeing that put on full display as these Jimmy Butler rumors continue to manifest themselves and him clearly wanting to go to Phoenix there. But to bring it back to these Sixers here, the way that you're able to add to this is start picking off some of the veterans. Kyle Lowry has a no-trade clause, I think is unlikely, but you got to have that conversation with him. Frankly, if he just wants to coach the rest of the year and sit on the sideline, that is absolutely fine by me. Eric Gordon, a guy who's finally shown a little bit of signs of life in recent games, kind of stinks that it's after the season is essentially lost at this point, and we still have half the year left to be played. Like it or not, there will be Sixers basketball put on the floor. But looking at these other lists, Gershon Yabusele is the really difficult one, as that was an absolute slam dunk addition by Daryl Morey, the exact type of player that every contender can benefit by having, and a guy who just straight up has outplayed that minimum contract in a massive way. But when you factor in the conversations about how it's unlikely they can keep him anyway, it does make sense to maximize value when looking down the barrel of what this Sixers team is. Andre Drummond, a guy that I absolutely want moved. We're seeing what Adem Bona can bring to this team. I love that he's getting a little additional opportunity and frankly shining in it. Justin Edwards, another clear success. That is a guy who was an undrafted free agent, is on a two-way contract. I would expect his deal gets upgraded to a standard contract at some point after the trade deadline there. But then there's some more difficult conversations. What is the future of Kelly Oubre? Is Caleb Martin really a significant part of this future team? Reggie Jackson should be shipped off if you can get anything in return. Ricky Council IV, while I would not mind Ricky being kind of the vibes or energy of this team for the remainder of the season, if you can get an asset back for him, you have to consider that if you're Daryl Morey at this point. Now, granted, how he specifically moves from here will tell us a lot about this season. There is a world in which behind the scenes, they're a little bit optimistic that they can still get that playoff run from Joel Embiid. If you can just sneak in that last play-in seed and play yourself in there, they could be a dangerous team. And as great as say this is how things play out, that the Sixers sneak in as that final playoff seed after winning the play-in tournament. Do the Cleveland Cavaliers scare you in the first round? I won't lie, they scare me far more now than I thought would be the case at the beginning of the season. The more I watch them, the more I buy in and that this is legitimate. But my point being here, we've seen top seeds get bumped out of the first round of the playoffs before. I mean, the Sixers have done it to the Chicago Bulls since the 2000s, and I know Derrick Rose got hurt. You can throw an asterisk next to it, but the point being that it does happen there. So if Daryl Morey believes that's the case, then they will not be selling off the farm. They will not be looking this. But I think the unfortunate reality is that is the best move for the Sixers organization. That you can kind of blend these two timelines, that you have the Joel Embiid time period, that if he can get a little bit of injury luck and this seemingly just being a season of hell, he can do whatever he needs to get done, whether it is another surgery, whether it is rehab, whether it is physical therapy, anything that he could possibly need should be the pure focus from here. And you can still have that timeline of the Joel Embiid era, with Paul George certainly being a part of it at his advanced age as well. And on top of that, Tyrese Maxey being just 24 years old. Jared McCain still just 20 years old and did not even get through an entire season. And if you can add a significant pick to that, maybe it is the best case scenario that it's Cooper Flagg, although I think that is unlikely based on, the lottery odds. And frankly, there is no world in which the NBA is rigging things in favor of the Sixers organization. But there's other talent in this draft. Dylan Harper is the real deal. Ace Bailey, you can talk me into. Did go down to Rutgers and catch a game in them first half against Penn State a couple weeks ago. Was very impressed with what I saw from Ace Bailey, and I will say I've been a skeptic. The shot selection still needs work. He's still raw in his abilities. He's got to grow. But the point being, that's going to be a dude. The work rate is there. The athleticism is there. The size is there. And there's other names as well. Casper from Illinois. Gonna butcher his last name, so won't go there yet. I'm not gonna dive down the entire list. VJ Edgecombe from Baylor, awesome player there. The point being here, there's a lot of talent that if the Sixers want to tap into this, you can start to form this organization and begin to blend where you have this next generation while still potentially competing now. So while this is a season from hell, while it is frustrating that things are off the rails, there is some long-term positive to take from this, but it is going to be interesting to see these steps the Sixers take to actively pursue that in the coming weeks. If we start seeing veterans flipped for draft picks, it is quite clear that this season is going down the drain, and frankly, it does seem like that's how things are heading. So let me know if you guys agree that that is the direction the Sixers should go. I've kind of fought this notion for really the entire season, still believing that this season can't get as bad as it has been, but you can't, fight the facts here, and the situation is what the situation is, so the Sixers need to adjust accordingly. So let me know if you guys are on the same page. If it is capture the flag season, tank the season as a whole, drop your comments below. As always, appreciate each and one of you guys tuning into this video here. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button and dropping a like if you have not already, and I'm going to keep fighting through the season one way or another, so hope you're rocking with me right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.